Look here, boys and girls, I shoot and you shoot. Have you ever wanted hearing protection with tactical sound control technology that enhances your environmental awareness while suppressing gunshot noise in under 2 milliseconds? That's developed in the US by a small family-owned company with a 30-day money-back guarantee and a 1-year warranty. Have you also wanted various options for the hearing protection that you use, as well as Bluetooth compatibility that will adjust the sound to not just the world, but what's playing in your ears? Well, boy howdy, that product is here with ISOtunes. With multiple options, all Bluetooth compatible, ISOtunes is that hearing protection provider. With 3 options such as the Caliber BT, a true wireless secure fit twist-to-lock design, the Advanced BT 2.0, a corded earbud set that has excellent controls, volume, and sound protection, and the DEFY Slim BT, a set of earmuffs with an ultra-slim design that comes in at 100 grams lighter than the leading earmuffs. Each one has its own exceptional set of features to provide you a better experience. For instance, the DEFY Slim has a barrel-ready contoured fit that minimizes as much interference as possible, versatile connectivity with Bluetooth 5.0 and an auxiliary jack, extended battery life with up to 25 hours of Bluetooth streaming or up to 120 hours of standard mode with just a pair of AAA batteries, an easy-to-access pair of wheels for either the World or the Bluetooth speakers that also provides optional gel cushions for comfort and better cooling, or the Caliber, which is ANSI rated at 25 decibels, that has no extra fills, passively reduces harmful noises on the range, that has a premium sound experience with custom-tuned dynamic drivers that deliver high-fidelity audio for music and podcasts, with SafeMax tech that keeps the volume nice and safe at 85 decibels, with seamless Bluetooth 5.2 connectivity, all-day battery life with up to 16 hours in TSC mode or 13 hours while running the Bluetooth. That also comes with a convenient carrying case that doubles as a charging port that will charge the earbuds twice, with IP67 durability, which is completely waterproof and dust tight. That also has a variety of earbud options that comes in the box, as well as a charging cable. There's even a neat little lanyard that you can use to carry it from place to place. And then there's my personal favorite, the Advanced BT 2.0. This is high-level hearing protection that's ANSI rated at 26 decibel noise reduction rating to keep my crappy ears nice and safe. The same custom-tuned dynamic drivers that are in the Caliber, only now we get an extra 5 decibels, Bluetooth 5.4 with low energy and Auracast, dual pairing, and 2-way radio compatibility, which can run up to 24 hours in TSC mode or up to 15 hours while running the Bluetooth continuously, charges very quickly, and is extremely durable. These are built for extreme conditions. They are mil standard 810H tested, IP67 dust and waterproof, solvent resistant, and have reinforced wiring. The earbuds themselves are also magnetic, so they can clip around my neck when they're not in use, and just as the Caliber, they come with a huge assortment of earbuds in the box, as well as a charging cable. I actually ended up using these the most because I can use them both on the range or under a helmet that I'm trying to use that isn't in conjunction also with earmuffs, and I also use them on rucks quite often too, because I'd like to listen to music or a podcast and not be hit by a truck. That said though, all of these are incredibly easy to use, and I enjoy the versatility from them all. Check out the link in the description below to visit ISOtunes. Keep your ears safe and entertained on the range, and be sure to tell them I sent you. Alright, so we're back, and this video is to field more or less a broad strokes answer to a question that I get often, and that is, hey, I'm new at this, what should I get first? Or hey, I'm not new at this, how should I progress? And what's interesting about this is that that's not really a cut and dry answer. It's not exactly as black and white as a lot of people would like to make it out to be, especially in the social media space. Now, of course, depending on who you ask, there are 2 different types of folks. Both really do suck. That will try to give you one of 2 takes. The first take is pretty head ass, and this is the just as good crowd. Or the type of folk that will consistently try and find every single reason to knock a piece of high quality equipment simply because it's expensive. And Look, this has been memed to death. The just as good crowd that's constantly trying to tell you that their Siley optic is good enough, or the very same folk that will sit there and perpetuate the same memes over and over again about how you can't buy skill, as if that was ever the question in the first place, or the types that like to pretend like they shoot a whole lot, and this is both in the influencer and non-influencer camp, and frankly one just feeds off the other, in that they'll review something as a, for instance, like an RMR Type 2, the RMR HD, or the RCR, and they'll say things like, oh well, these optics aren't exciting enough for me, or they're disappointing, and the reasons will be a list of these features that these optics do not have, as a for instance, stating things like, what's so hard about a shake awake feature in an RMR, not realizing that the power required to turn the optic all the way on requires storage of power, which requires you to delete power in a battery in order to do it, which really is just a way for this company to conceal the fact that they have pretty inefficient electronics, and that if they were to run all the time, they would absolutely kill these batteries really fast. Because myself included, and anyone that I know that actually regularly uses an individual holosun optic for extended periods of time, for instance, does not get anywhere close to the listed battery life on the box. Because generally speaking, if it's got a shake awake, and if this smaller battery in this case lasts longer than 6 to 8 months, I'd actually be impressed by that one example. Except it never happens. And we don't even have to get fixated on this. We can go further back in time, because this has happened quite a lot. For instance, there was a point in time when Knights Armament made the best AR-15 on the planet, and there were people that would find reasons to complain about it, citing one of its best features, its cold hammer forged barrel, as a really rather stupid reason for their disdain, saying that, oh, well, for this kind of money, this gun should be more accurate, not realizing that, yes, a cold hammer forged chrome line barrel is going to be a little less accurate than a non-cold hammer forged barrel, but is also going to give it a third to nearly half, again, more barrel life than a regular button rifled barrel, but then we just ignore that part because these people don't shoot their guns. Point is that these guys are super annoying, and a lot of times they have a tendency to mix and intermingle with the anti-modernizing crowd, and now you have a whole cornucopia of stupid. The other half of the idiot pie graph is the more money than sense folks. And of course, you know the type. They basically just got here, they never shoot their guns either, but they base all of their opinions off of some cherry-picked stuff from a guy that was trying to share real information, but they didn't really hear any of it because they don't know how to listen. And of course, all of the advice that they try to impart on you from these cherry-picked examples come from their CAG or SEAL friend that doesn't actually exist. It was just some guy in a podcast. These guys do actually say things unironically, like stop being poor, also shoot like garbage, but also have a tendency to write really, really long opinions as well. It's just equally because nothing that they had to say was of any real merit or focus or of worth, because the second that you start thinking about what they have to say critically, it falls apart as well. And what really is irritating is when the guy that's confused by all of this swirling nonsense by these people comes out to class with a jumbled mess of confused equipment because he wants to do well, but his lack of experience hasn't informed his decision making yet, and before too terribly long there's a lot of mistakes that were made, understandably so. So this video right here is tailored specifically to the guy that isn't in either one of these camps, wants to budget correctly, wants to monitor logistics, and wants to actually learn, because the main intent here is to train. And look, I understand how difficult this is. Everyone is trying to tell you something. An ad led this video, and I'm going to try and push classes on you by the end of it. I get it. But the fact of the matter is that over time, I have noticed a pretty strong set of tiers, or rather logical progression of the individual with their skill set that could help a lot of guys out. So let's begin. Now, look, I don't do 6,000 round tests because it looks good on a thumbnail. What I do, and the reason why it's over the course of months and not years, is because as far as machines go, that's pretty high volume stuff. Now, of course, there are guys that shoot significantly more than me, and they also understand that this is really hard on machines in general, but generally speaking, the reason why I do the tests that I do, and in the volume that I do them, is to more or less get a good understanding of what these individual products are going to deal with over the course of their life cycle. And instead of trying to do some sort of drop test or some really stupid rebranded burn down that teaches the individual almost nothing unless you're Aaron Cowan and plan to put that firearm back into circulation for the next 20,000 rounds, the fact of the matter is that it doesn't really teach you anything. What actually teaches someone about how a machine runs is to actually shoot the bullets in drills intended to train so that those rounds are fired organically, just under higher volume. And of course, the amount of time that is spent over the course of those initial 6,000 rounds actually helps to teach you about the individual product. Now, I'm not saying that you should go out there and replicate 6,000 round tests on all of your pieces of equipment. Not everyone really needs to be that autistic. The point is that I'm doing it so that you don't have to. But what I've come away with is more or less a sensible progression for someone that is brand new and wants to start this whole thing out. So let's get to the beginning stuff. Whether or not you have the budget for this, I would say that if you are just now getting into shooting and training and things like that, or even if you've had passing interest in this, meaning it's a hobby, but now you want to double and triple down on your training because it's very important to you, I would say that when you're new to that side of the house, whether it's heavy competition or self-defense stuff, or yes, skill development requires experience, so don't make any really big moves, especially with gobs of equipment, because this could hurt you later on as you develop different preferences for different things. Well, what do I mean by this? There's a lot of people that view the apex of gun shooting characteristics as the CZ Shadow 2, or the Glock 47, or a Beretta 92 style gun, or a 2011. If you start on one of these paths, you may figure out that you are a completely different person as far as preferences over time, and that huge expense ends up hurting you later because you have to offload it to somebody that's going to try and look at your gun and be like, wow, this was shot a whole lot, now I'm going to really lowball you as far as price goes when you try to sell this thing. What I would say instead is to get into everything significantly cheaper with good enough equipment. Now, good enough doesn't mean cheap garbage. Good enough means you have a certain standard of serviceable, don't go below it. And frankly, once you get to that certain standard of serviceable, as you go, that standard should only increase because your experiences are informing your decision making. For instance, if we were to start with a Glock 19 that's got an optics mounting interface that's nice and solid, where instead of the MOS plate you have a forward controls plate, you add on a set of suppressor height Ameriglows, you then add a Holosun 507 comp and a Streamlight TLR1 HL, because the new one seems to have endurance issues, especially in them switches. None of this is upper level equipment. It really isn't. But what you do have is a handgun that can do everything that you ask it to do. There isn't a compensator added in there. There isn't a fancy trigger added in there. There isn't a fancy set of controls. But what I do have is an extremely reliable magazine pool to pull from, a solid optic that isn't real expensive, that will fill the roles that you need it to fill, and a light that's nice and hardy, that's nice and fast. None of this is particularly flashy stuff, and you get away with a lot pretty quickly. In addition to this, you don't have to start going down the budget gun route to where a lot of mistakes could be made that end up more expensive than this setup in the first place. This right here is the bar for good to go, because it is in fact good enough. And as far as new through intermediate levels of experience, good enough is in fact perfect, because there is no limits as far as parts, supplies, replacement springs, none of that. And as you learn how to actually shoot the gun, you can then make informed decisions based off of your experience. Although I would say not to make any of these moves until you fired about 10,000 rounds through that gun and understand what exactly is going on with that overall system. In addition to this, whether or not it's with me, I would highly recommend that you go to at least one really good trainer, because that's going to forward your progression significantly faster. Not because anybody is teaching anything particularly magic worthy, because a solid trainer is going to teach you how to fire up your detection gear. How do you notice when things are going wrong? How do I notice that my techniques aren't where they should be? How do I notice when I am not putting the correct pressure on the gun in different places? And most importantly, how do I correct that? All this does when you go home from that class or two or whatever is give you the necessary steps to develop on your own, especially if whoever you're going to has high development standards and will sit there and nitpick you. All of this is pretty important, and we're talking about the beginning stages here. The next thing that you should get, really, and this is either before or after that class, is a shot timer. Now, this isn't just to monitor your split times. What this is more than anything else is to help you quantify what it is that you're doing. And listen, I know a lot of people that refuse to buy shot timers because they say stupid things like, I've never heard a shot timer in combat. Got it? Cool, but you've never done cable flies in combat either. This is a tool to help you. And more important than anything else, you will never ever know if you're actually progressing if you can't quantify your results. So you need a shot timer and a solid drill set to follow, and over time this starts to look like its own little gym schedule if you plan on progressing in any meaningful way, because you have the ability to track it. And before we talk about anything fancy, you need to get really squared away in the concealed carry department. Now, holsters and that sort of stuff will evolve over time, especially as you progress, but something that I can mention to someone that can get them started is from tier 1 concealed. Now, I've got a bunch of their holsters. Their holsters are pretty high quality stuff, and I've run them well past when I should replace them, and they still refuse to die. So this is good stuff. Again, if I were to start someplace, that's another thing that I would start with too. And notice how none of this is terribly cheap, but again, there's a minimum rung of performance with regards to saying what's good enough. And that's where we are here. And frankly, this really is just the place to start. Concealed handgun with a shot timer. You've got a class or two under your belt, and then you can start to program in your own training regimen to progress on your own. This really is the beginning step, because regardless to what person is going to say what, from what influencer ring, from whatever, doesn't matter. Regardless to what most people think, if you live in this country, your primary is a friggin' handgun and it's concealed. So you might as well start to get good at those things before we start looking at other stuff. Now, as you progress, a lot of guys are going to start thinking about a rifle, and I absolutely agree with that. Behind every blade of grass is a thing, 2A is a thing, solid home defense is a thing. I absolutely agree with this, and you should take a look at this too. However, I have a take on this that a lot of people in this comment section are going to disagree with, because they're trying to get you to build a gun when you don't have enough experience to do that. My advice is not to go with a budget company. My advice is not to assemble your own. None of that. Let's focus on turnkey selections, let's focus on stuff that'll work, and let's focus on fairly generic stuff as far as parts commonality, as well as, again, the very basic rungs of good enough. So the first thing that I'm not going to recommend to you is Palmetto State Armory, because frankly, let's just call it what it is. This is the home of the League of Extraordinary Budget Gun Builders, as well as guys that have tons of experience and know how rifles work, that want to put together a cheap project as a toy and also know how to visually inspect everything that comes from them. Don't touch them, go someplace else. Where someplace else? Just go to BCM and get a complete rifle. This thing should be a 14.5 mid-length gas system, so you can learn how to shoot it well in whatever handguard that you deem will be comfortable in the support hand, because you'll figure out that none of that matters. This right here is a general purpose rifle that will do literally whatever you want it to, and frankly, once you start running down the rabbit hole of little projects that are interesting for whatever project that you can cook up in your head, what you'll come to realize is that 14.5 mid-length is still the best shooting rifle that you have. It's incredibly reliable, and the available parts that are just floating about that you can just find and then use are going to work in your favor every single time. Now, I personally have a viewpoint to add ambidextrous controls and that sort of stuff, but you don't even need this yet. You need that gun, a Raptor charging handle in it, a solid flash suppressor, go from there. And notice how I said nothing about plate carriers, body armor, gun belts, laser aiming modules, none of that. None of those things are required at all in the early stages. What I would say is required is a set of solid and locking backup iron sights so you can learn how to use those, a good optic with lower 1/3 mount because it is very flexible as far as height over bore, especially at close ranges, which makes it easier to learn. And as far as all that goes, a solid first choice is a Holosun Ames. You pair that up with a decent Streamlight rifle mounted light and you're good to go. At least for a while anyway, until you start developing preferences for other stuff. Again, none of this is phenomenal equipment by any stretch, but what it will do is get you to the next spot once you start developing real opinions based off of your experiences, based off of your training. Oh, and you probably want to pick up a pretty solid rifle sling too. I personally have been using the Magpul MS3 for a long time with crush hooks. That's 2-to-1 point convertible. You're probably not going to like that, but a solid 2-point sling that's going to work really good and also has really adaptable mounts for that is from Tech 10. These guys make really good slings. I've been evaluating a couple for a while now, but this is more or less done. So get yourself hooked up with that stuff and you're set. And again, notice that I mentioned nothing that revolves around body armor or gun belts. Look, some of the fastest reloads I've ever done in my life came out of a back pocket from a pair of jeans. You're probably better off learning how to use this rifle in a pair of jeans with a concealed handgun on your body before anything else, because as far as likelihood of use, that's more likely than all this other stuff. And yeah, you've seen me use a myriad of different equipment at this point. And the reason why all of this extra equipment even comes out in the first place is because of what happens next. Alright, so by this point, we've actually noticed a lot of different stuff. We've learned a lot of different things too. Mainly, that logistics is a really big part of your day-to-day as far as all this gun stuff is concerned. All of this is wildly important because, look, amateurs try and think about all of the tactical junk. Professionals make logistics their first concern. And by this point, there's a lot of extra thoughts that have popped into the mind about, hey, well, should I get this to augment or improve what it is that I'm doing? Would this be nicer? Why don't I bring this in? And that all makes a lot of sense because by now there probably is a gun belt in the closet or likely the car now. There is a plate carrier with solid plates and a bunch of little doodads to work all of your stuff right. That all makes perfect sense. But once we've more or less figured out the logistics of a continuous training path, the next thing that you really should look back on is all of this starter gear that you're likely still running to this day. And the thing that I have learned over time is that instead of trying to get new stuff like guns, action types, all of this other stuff, what I've noticed that my first real advancement should have been is to take all of this starter gear that I'm not even looking at so favorably anymore because there's other things that are better at certain specific things than these pieces of equipment that I started with. And what I should have done at this point is look back at all of that and upgun it to its apex. This is when the ramjet goes on, or whatever compensator, or port it even. This is when you upgun to a Trigicon, pick the thing. This is when you get that X300, or Mini Scout, or can, or shorter barrel, or whatever it is that you want to do. And the reason for this, honestly, is very simple, because once you've figured out the logistics behind training a lot, you've also figured out what the wear and tear does to the good enough level of equipment. And the good enough level of equipment can get you to the job and get it done, but there's a difference between getting the job done and optimizing. And this is where lots of people, particularly lots of influencers, fall flat on their friggin' face. Because if you are the person that's actually trained versus tried to blindly buy gear or find reasons to downgrade seriously good quality stuff, you'll understand why it is that a Geisley Super Dynamic Combat or 3-gun is as expensive as it is, because you've paid attention to what it takes to make those pieces of equipment. By now, we'll have understood that the hardiness of the RMR, RCR, RMR HD family is but one reason why it's an extra few $100s more expensive. And that's because these things are necessary in order to actually use these pieces of equipment under high volume and over a period of years. And then, of course, that's when we start looking at the other projects that we want to fund. one. Once you have the 2 guns that are just boring to you, that if you needed to perform pick the task at one point or another and it had to get done, you had 2 guns that you could just go grab because these things are baked into your DNA at this point. That's when we can jump down the rabbit hole and get all kinds of random stuff at that point to sit there and experiment with to really figure out what optimizing really means. It's when you figure out that a different action type actually suits you very slightly better than what you learned how to shoot with does. And so realistically speaking, this is more or less the pathway that I've noticed works for a lot of people, and that very few people actually approach organically because, well, some people have better sales pitches than others. And when some people that don't know how to budget meet someone that refuses to, that's also when a lot of things happen to folks as well. So look, I figured that this would be a video that I could just throw at some folks when they're brand new to something that actually points them towards stuff that they can go get, as well as an explanation of a lot of the psychology of progression that is indeed healthy to that person and actually follows the path that they really want to follow but just don't really know, because again, some sales pitches are really good, and regardless of what crowd wants to say what and what head-ass take someone has for something that they have a personal grudge against in some way, this is more or less a pathway that I've seen a lot of people pick up that I wish I did when I was new to this. So there you go. And speaking of sales pitches, if you'd like to come out and train with us, you absolutely can. We have open enrollment classes scheduled out to December in locations like Alabama, Ohio, Mississippi, and others. Oh, and Lebanon, PA, we're going back there too. If you'd like to support us through Patreon, you can absolutely do that as well. It is a massive help to us, and if you want to get something out of it, $41 a month gets you as much open enrollment training as you would like. The only exceptions being logistically challenging classes like a soft skin vehicle class, one of which I just taught last weekend, or a private class, which we do in fact do, and you can't take advantage of that one through $41 a month for pretty obvious reasons. Also, if you would like to check out our social media links, we have a bunch of those, including a Discord that we recently opened up. Also, if you don't want to do any of those things and you just want to support the channel through any other means, you can drop a super thanks below, or you can give us a like, a subscribe, hit the little notification bell, because that's the real subscribe button anyway. And remember guys, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.